Welcome to the Love of the Game, for the Love of the Game podcast, episode number 6. Opening week of the NBA season. Let's go with your hosts, Jefferson Beaufort and Brian Hernandez. Brian, how are you feeling today?
Yo, I love the energy. The energy right now. Oh my god. Opening. We finally saw some opening regular season basketball. Man, there's so much to talk about this week. I can't wait. Let's get started. Jeff, what are the topics we are talking about this week?
All right. Yeah, so the topics that we're going to start off with today and head down in this order is some recent contract extensions that we've seen throughout the league. Obviously, some noticeable ones that are headlining all over Twitter, and the more recent news around Ben Simmons and his ever-changing situation. Our team spotlight on the Milwaukee Bucks today, and some standout play in the beginning of the season. And lastly, the NBA Top 75 anniversary list has officially been 100% revealed, and there's a lot to unpack on that.
Yeah, that list also was just released like, I guess, 45 minutes ago since we started recording. So I'm very excited to get into this. Fresh off the press right now, like, what can be better? So,
Exactly.
do you want to start with DeAndre Ayton?
Yes. So, all right. I guess this is a great way to start off the show because honestly, if you couldn't make this up of how much drama there's been since we've started talking about the NBA, but this is just adding to the list of drama that we're hearing is DeAndre Ayton, and honestly, actually, let's pull back a little bit more. Last year in the Western Conference Finals, as either it was the Western Conference Finals or the semifinals, we heard Chris Paul infamously say that, oh yeah, for sure, without a doubt, we're getting DeAndre Ayton, that bag this year. And apparently, the two sides with the Suns and Ayton have not come to agreement on a deal as of this part of the year. Another thing that makes this interesting is that you're seeing other individuals within the team get their extensions. Granted, they're not to the same level of where Ayton is or the money that Ayton is expecting. So this is leaving us to see the situation and wonder where is it turning next. Right now, Ayton came out. He had a good game last night. He didn't look visibly upset with the team. He's handling it like a professional, but you wonder how long this is going to take and when are they going to figure this out, because obviously the deadline already is reached on the extension at least.
Yeah, there's so many paths this can go. I wonder, with Mikal Bridges actually getting his extension, I wonder if there's a little tension at all. Like you're saying, DeAndre, and even we see it on through his words and his actions all the time. He's very professional. I'm sure there probably isn't a big deal in their locker room or anything like that. But I wonder if deep inside there's a little tension there, and he's feeling a little butthurt about that. But DeAndre Ayton, there was a report by ESPN saying that his expectation, he wanted the Trae Young max, which is 5 years, $172 million. He wants the super max. He wants it all. The problem was Phoenix, they weren't willing to give him 5 years. They didn't want to give him all those years, which is kind of interesting coming from, we talked about this with Michael Porter Jr. of Jeff, your biggest point was signing Michael Porter Jr. to this giant extension right now is great because 3-4 years down the line, now you have this guy at a bargain. So with DeAndre Ayton, it's kind of a similar situation with him being what, like 22, 23 years old. If you sign him to this giant extension, great, because later on, 4 years, 3 years down the line, when the salary cap has raised, DeAndre Ayton is going to look like a bargain. Right now, it doesn't look like that, but it's going to look like that eventually when he's reaching his prime. And yet, that's the stopping point, apparently, that we hear from the Suns. Very, very interesting there.
It's kind of a situation that you see typically like with in football, is that generally like a running back is not, their value is kind of devalued compared to the rest of the team. It's never really easy to pinpoint how much flexibility do you want to have on future proofing this, but also giving the top dollar and maximizing that. That's the same thing that typically happens for big men in the NBA, is that big men typically take a longer time to maturate and get to that point. We've seen guys that have gotten money early, but typically they hold off on bigger men. And because, like I said, figuring it out, it doesn't usually come in the first 2-3 years. Or either if you did figure out that early on, sometimes you could fall right off of the face of the universe. For example, Dwight Howard's first half of his career was literally Hall of Fame worthy. And then the second half of his career was completely a role player. He was relegated to being a role player. And that's where you have all of this like uncertainty of like, do you want to give this guy 5 years? Because on the back end of that, and I'm paying 45, 50, whatever dollars it is that he's looking for, or 40 in that time, and he's not producing to the level we want, they're going to say that this does not justify the means of doing this.
Yeah, it's so tough. It's exactly what you said. With a center is just not as valuable as the other positions, like a guard or even a wing. Those positions, the way the rules are set in the NBA, the way the NBA is played today, those positions are so valuable. And centers are, like you said, exactly like running backs. They're expendable. Unless you have a top 3 or 4 center, everyone else is kind of just there. Unless you have Jokic or Embiid or like any of those guys, which as we see, there's not a lot. And Ayton, in my opinion, is actually kind of like in the cusp of there. Like he's not there yet. He's not at that talent, but he's at the top end of the centers of like, maybe he's like 6 or 5 or even maybe 7 or like 8 on that list. Cause it's very tough. And for the Suns, you just drafted this guy as your number 1 pick. And I find it tough, like when you draft this guy as your number 1 pick and you kind of are like hesitant and did not give him this extension that he wants. Like you're saying, Chris Paul was just talking about, this man's going to get it. This man is going to earn it. He just broke out during last season in the playoffs, and they're still very hesitant about this. So now what this leads DeAndre Ayton to is becoming a restricted free agent. So at the end of the day, they still have all the power and leverage in this, because whatever team offers him a contract, and if he ever signs that contract, as of right now, it seems like it's almost going to be 100% chance that the Suns are going to match that, and he's going to stay with the Suns.
Yeah.
So that's what it seems like going forward. He does have the option to also pick up his qualifying option, meaning he can become an unrestricted free agent if he decides to keep his rookie money, which is probably like, rookies get paid. The first round picks get paid, or first pick overall get paid like $15-16 million a year. So he's not losing on a ton of money, but still, like, to go from $15-16 million a year to 30 plus is a big difference. And for a player like DeAndre Ayton, it's that's a lot of money to leave on the table. I'm sure he doesn't have all those endorsements and all that other stuff that are also generating a ton of money.
You know, there was something I did wanted to say too, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. Is I think that it's interesting to think, based off of what you were saying, that they didn't want to offer him that 5 year. Obviously, they know that other teams can't offer him that
Yep.
5th year, right? But also think about the contract that Chris Paul just signed was a 4 year contract. So is it crazy to think that the organization is saying that his success is kind of tied to Chris Paul, and they're not willing to associate beyond that, or allow for them to reassess after that? Is what I'm starting to think. What do you think about that?
I like that. I that's actually is probably a big part of it. I mean, the Chris Paul, it's a 4 year contract, but at the end of the day, his 4th year, he's going to be 40, and they also have a team option on that. And I think there's some other like little stuff on there, meaning like he would get paid less money. So usually when you see like a contract have a team option, it's generally a 3 year contract. So like you're saying, that even proves your point even more of like, if they're really thinking about Chris Paul for the next 3 years, that's huge. And we saw the huge jump that DeAndre Ayton was able to take with Chris Paul last year. I'm sure that is probably very high on their list of concerns to not actually give him that money. I like it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. It's very interesting to see what's going to happen going forward with DeAndre Ayton. Most likely he's going to stay a Sun. I would right now I'd put like 95% on DeAndre Ayton staying a Sun. There's a lot of things that had to happen in order for him to leave. Don't see it happening. But let's see how this relationship if there's going to be like any rift in there between the Suns and DeAndre Ayton, because he's been very vocal about wanting all this money. And if he's not going to get all that money, I wonder what happens. Next. Oh yeah, sorry.
I agree, because like I feel the same way that the Suns are starting to become a world class a front office with James Johnson leading the way. I don't think that he'll allow for this to get to a dire point. He will definitely make sure that it doesn't get to that point.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And on the other hand, like I touched on a little bit, Mikal Bridges got his extension. And this leads him into being the highest paid 3D player. I for some reason I don't have his exact contract in front of me, but he's getting. Oh, you got it?
I have it. It is 4 over 90.
4 over 90.
And,
so, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that leads him to getting paid 22.5 a year, which for a player of Mikal Bridges, Jeff, I want to get your thoughts. Is this an overpay, an underpay? Is this on target? What do you think?
It brings up something that we mentioned in the past, was the extension for Duncan Robinson, the extension for, the contract for Joe Harris. I think that honestly, it's not a bad contract. It honestly is not a bad contract. I think it's right up the alley of where it needs to be. I believe that's the same money that Duncan Robinson got. I believe
it's very close to there. If not,
Duncan Robinson's over 5 years, so that's the difference. So it is interesting that they only took the 4 years, but like I mentioned, it's starting to feel like they're not willing to tie to anyone beyond 4 years, beyond the Chris Paul experiment, and that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually really think about it, if all this goes to crap and this experiment doesn't work out, it's a very smart move to not leave all that money, because if you can't win with Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Mikal Bridges, you can do some trades if your contracts are about to expire or anything like that. You can move and you have a lot of flexibility. But if you tie all these guys up and then you realize without Chris Paul, because Chris Paul is getting older, like you mentioned, and if all this doesn't work out, that would be really bad for them. If they have all these guys on giant contracts and it's not really leading to a playoff championship or just anything, some real success. That's a big point.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's yeah. Please.
Happy to see that. Happy to see that he got his money. You know, definitely proved why he deserves to be with the team a long term. And you know, even before Chris Paul got there, I thought he had signs that showed that he has a game that could make him at least a 10-year veteran in this game, even if it doesn't have to be on the Suns.
Yeah, Mikal Bridges is actually probably one of my favorite players, mainly because of like, he's not your superstar, but in terms of role players and knowing exactly what they want to, what they need to do for your team, he's the elite of the elite. He is the best at that. And he could do everything, and getting into throughout the years, like you can see his game is progressing. He can put the ball on the floor a little bit more. He can do all these things. Still young. And I actually think that this is kind of a slight underpay. Even though, like I was saying, he's a role player, so he's not your star. He's so elite at what he does. And I believe if he went into unrestricted free agency, this man would probably get like 25 a year, maybe 25 plus, because that's something, his skill set is something that every team needs. And I just think he's so valuable that the Suns actually got him for a steal, and it seems like he really likes playing there. And like you said, he signed for 4 years when he could have got 5. I think the Suns got a steal with that.
I do agree with that.
With the next guy, so we're going a little more rapid fire with these next few guys. So next we have Jaren Jackson Jr. We're signing a 4-year, $105 million contract, which leads to $26.5 million annually. What do you think about Jaren Jackson Jr.?
Obviously, you always feel some type of apprehension when guys that get extension like this that already have shown that they have some injury history and they're kind of prone to injury. You do feel okay. It's not that crazy. It's not that crazy that they gave him the money, because at the point where they are at, if he is healthy, perfect 1-2 punch for the Grizzlies to have him and John Morant. You know, I think there's a few other pieces that you look at on the team that complement the both of them. That seeing them bring in, we spoke about him a few podcasts back. He was from the Pelican Center.
Steven Adams.
Steven Adams. Seeing how Steven Adams is working himself into the rotation and allowing for Jaren Jackson to do something similar to like what Anthony Davis is doing. Obviously, he has the size to be a 5, but he feels comfortable in a 4. So I do like them committing to him. If he could stay healthy, good contract.
Yeah, the biggest thing about this contract is really just his health, because he just hasn't had the history of staying healthy. And when he is healthy, he's actually a very good player. Is he a $26.5 million contract player? I don't know. But at the end of the day, too, I think it's a fine contract for Memphis, because at the end of the day, it's kind of tough for Memphis to allure some free agents. So like, who else are you going to spend this money on? It's good to give it to him. At the same time, too, some little details about the contract. It's actually a descending contract, meaning that he's actually getting paid his highest amount his first year, and then as the years go on, he's actually getting paid less money. So 4 years down the line, this contract's going to look really good if he continues to stay healthy and if he continues to progress. Next, sorry.
I was going to mention is that you see that with a lot of these smaller town, smaller market teams. Typically have those descending contracts. So
yeah, no,
like
it's value. It's great value. Another guy got his contract extension, Kevin Huerter, as we just saw, just went off in the playoffs for Atlanta. 4 years, $65 million and $16.25 million annually, that is. Do you think overpay, underpay, or just right?
Okay, so I want to try to take Kevin Huerter out of the equation about this. I am thinking about the whole team and thinking of what the future looks like. If you're looking at the dollars Kevin Huerter got, you might say, okay, that's not too bad. Probably could go a little bit less. Probably could do. Some people would say could probably go a little bit higher. But my issue more is locking in the future of all of these guys is where I have the fear in. Is because if it doesn't work, you've now extended everyone and you've put a log jam in how you could in your flexibility. I think you understand why like a team like Atlanta does that because they're typically not bringing in talent through free agency that is gonna, turn the level to turn them on to the next level. But I still don't believe that you lock up everybody at the same time, especially within almost less than 18 months of each other. I think Trae Young was earlier last year. And then you have Trae Young, John Collins, him, and Clint Capella all have extensions at this point.
Yeah, and then think about it. You're gonna have to eventually Cam Reddish. You have DeAndre Hunter. They're probably gonna extend at least one or two of those guys, if not both. It's like you're saying, they're locking up their future on this core. And as we saw, this core is actually very good and they're very talented and they're young. So you can expect them to improve in the future. But as you think about it, do they have enough star talent? Does John Collins take that next step into stardom? Does maybe Bogdanovich or any of these other guys, do they take a step up? Because in my opinion, they need just a little more juice. Like they're very close. We talked about them at the beginning of the year of like, we would love to see them trade some of these guys going forward because they have so many great young pieces that why not cash some of those in to bring in a better talent overall? Kevin Huerter, like you said, for the money, it's not bad. It's pretty good. Kevin Huerter is a good player. And I think it means something having like a culture and all that. As you see, like all these guys, they really like playing with each other. They work really well together. And I'm sure that's going to help them this season, getting some wins because they're kind of ahead of everyone else who has a lot of new players and they have to figure things out. They kind of already have that figured out. Yeah, so that's Kevin Huerter. This next guy, I'm actually very interested to get your thoughts on as having watching him all of last year, who is Landry Shamet. He got a 4 years, $43 million contract with Phoenix, which ends up to $10.75 million annually. What do you think about Landry Shamet?
Can you run through the numbers again? What was that again?
It's 4 years, $43 million. So that ends up to $10.75 million annually.
Okay. I'll give you two reasons why I love it. Good value at 11. Around 11, is that when I'm
Yeah.
11,
Yep.
pushing close to that,
Yes.
or a little bit more. On the contract, I like that for Landry Shamet. But the second side of the coin is, I think Landry Shamet is a good enough of a player to have had been in a consistent situation. Think about what he has been asked to do in his short career. He's been asked to be on the Sixers and help them propel their championship goals. He's been on the Clippers to help them propel their championship goals. He was on the Nets last year to help them propel their championship goals. So for the guy to come and show up and actually produce year to year and that type of high level high level and aspirations, and fulfill what he has to do and know his role, is why I would say, yeah, get this man his money and allow for him to feel a little bit comfortable in the situation that he's in, because he's been bouncing every year.
Yeah, I think going into this, I actually didn't really think too much about the consistency and how important that is for players. So that actually kind of swayed me to actually thinking like this is a good contract. $10 million for a player of Landry Shamet isn't bad. It's decent value in my opinion. He probably, I say like on a 1 year contract, you probably get like maybe a little bit less or anything like that. But for that amount, it's good. That's crazy to think of Landry Shamet's career being on all these different championship challenging teams, and now he's on another one in the Suns, and I'm excited to see what he does there. Especially, I mean, everyone that plays with Chris Paul just like takes a giant step up. Looking at someone like Campaign, but like I'm excited to see, does Landry Shamet also take that step up? I mean, he's been playing with great players this whole time, so that should be interesting. Another guy, second to last, is Grayson Allen for the Milwaukee Bucks. 2 years, 20 million, 10 million annually. What do you think?
I won't go too crazy because I want to save some for our
Yeah.
spotlight on them.
Sure.
But I will say, good value. Bring in a guy that is a more of a two-way player, in the sense that 3 and D, once again, like we were mentioning with Mikal Bridges, and this is for a bargain, because we all know the moniker behind Grayson Allen. So first, allows for him to fix up his reputation, his image, if he's able to help them exceed in the playoffs and do what he did on Tuesday night. And then also for him to, just in 2 years, show that he deserves a bigger contract if he's playing the way that he could possibly.
Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying with like a 3 and D player, like this is pretty perfect. This is exactly like the range of this is exactly where you want them to be. I'm thinking of like other players like Reggie Bullock and all that. I think he's getting like 12 million for like 3 years, and this is pretty much the range of where they get paid. And 2 years, not committing too much, but you still get a really good player that can help you. Because as of right now, we all see the Bucks don't need any more stars. They need some great role players that know exactly what they can do in the NBA. And Grayson Allen, we all know he knows himself. He's not going to be a star. So play some great defense, make some threes. That's all you need to do. Great contract. Last guy, not kind of in a different category than all these other guys. He actually extended on his current contract, which had 2 years left. So now he's going to have 4 years on his contract. It is Malcolm Brogdon. He extended for 2 more years. So now his contract is going to be 4 years, 89.3 million, which leads him to $22.5 million annually. What do you think about Malcolm Brogdon?
young man, get that bread. That's what I'm gonna say first. But on all being serious now is yeah, I like that for him to get that security on knowing he has 4 years now of you know getting paid, right? But if I'm thinking about the Pacer side of it, there's a lot of things that I'm looking at with the Pacers that just doesn't seem to make sense, and that was one of them. I kind of would want to have him wait it out, see what we have, and then we make a decision next year on a contract year rather than 2 years out, where it's we've talked about it, the psychology of what a contract year feels like for a player and how it pushes them to go to another level. So why wouldn't you want that to happen with Malcolm Brogdon? I know he has proven that he's a solid player. He could be a fringe all-star caliber player. But I want to see him back against the wall trying to figure it out for a contract and see what type of Malcolm Brogdon would you get in that case.
Yeah, I think I like what you brought up of the contract year, because everyone steps up during that contract year. He's already at like a very high level, like you're saying, fringe all-star type of player right now. I guess on the flip side, which is good for the Pacers, they lock up that type of player for not max money. So let's say he keeps improving and now you still have him, but you didn't have to give him that giant contract that he might have wanted. So you get him for what's going to be a bargain in the future, and you have a solid contributor. And the one interesting thing that I think about all this is all of last year, and then probably since they signed him, it's kind of been like Malcolm Brogdon, available to trade, give us your best package and we'll see what we can do. And they just been shopping him this entire time. And even more recently with the Ben Simmons stuff, there's a rumor of if they trade Ben Simmons to the Pacers, Malcolm Brogdon's going to be in that deal. Now, what this means by him getting this extension is he actually can't be traded for another year. So that deal or that thought that Ben Simmons coming to the Pacers is actually off the table now. So that's an interesting thought about it. But this is actually a contract that I really like. Malcolm Brogdon, I think, is a great player. We'll love to see him take another step up. So, real quick, there's some players that were actually available for extension that I thought were kind of interesting that we can bring up. Let me know if you want to touch on any of these guys. Oh, there is one that we're going to touch on. But first, Miles Bridges was a 10th pick, not extended.
Yep.
Kevin Knox, 8th pick. Forget about him. We don't even have to talk about it. I hate Kevin. I like Kevin Knox. I'm sure he's a great guy. He's always seemed like a nice guy, but he's not doing
on the court. On the court, he's not the happy. He does not make you the most happy.
Exactly. Actually, no. Kevin Knox was the 9th pick. The 8th pick, Colin Sexton, not extended. We saw this offseason that they were seeming to shop him, and a big reason why a lot of teams didn't kind of jump on it was because of knowing if you trade for Colin Sexton, you're going to have to extend him. And he's going to want some big money. And obviously the Cavs also saw themselves, he's not necessarily worth it. Next, Lonnie Walker, the 18th pick, no extension. He had a pretty good year last year for the Spurs. You have Mo Bamba, who's breaking out this season. He was the 6th pick, no extension. Jerome Robinson, the 13th pick, no extension. And the guy that actually I want to talk about a little bit more is Marvin Bagley III, the 2nd pick in the draft, no extension. Over a Luka Doncic, over Trae Young. This man, Marvin Bagley, the second pick. Is this one of the worst draft busts we've seen?
I always feel that like when you think about bust and when you think about uh naturally like how we get to this point, you gotta also think the team is at fault in not putting this person in the right situation. I think if he lands somewhere else, maybe he has a longer career, maybe he has a more serviceable career, or maybe he's able to express or use his talent. I just don't think that they allow for him to play the game he wants to play.
Yeah.
And that's an issue, you know? It is, but we all know is De'Aaron Fox his show, you know, the king of that. But I don't know if he ever gets a chance to show what he would look like if he was running the show. But it sucks. He is going to be labeled a bust. He is going to be up there with some of the biggest ones, like the I believe it's the Sam Bowie.
Yeah.
With he's going to be up there because like you can't have two honestly generational talents and then it literally is the Sam Bowie situation because you think about it, you think about you could not pass on DeAndre Ayton at that size. You don't find that, right? So the Suns made the right decision in doing that, right? Then you have Bagley fit right into that too. And then 3 and 4 being generational talents, much like Jordan and like Barkley were for the 84 draft. So like you're just sitting there and you're thinking like, damn, you're right. Like it might be right up there with one of the biggest busts ever.
Yeah, because that's a tough thing. Bagley's not a bad player. He's really not terrible. Like you said, there's a lot of situations happening in Sacramento that lead him, and also just a lot of injuries on his part that stopped him. Anytime he's looked like he's about to break out or do something great, he gets an injury and then he's shut down for a while. But man, you pass up on Luka. I'm still shocked about just how does anyone pass up on Luka? We can all see at the time, this man, 18 years old, the MVP of the Spain league, the MVP of just the second best league of the world. You don't see 18-year-olds doing what they do at that stage. We can see the elite talent. And yet, for some reason, this man still picked number 3. And the Sacramento Kings had the audacity to take Marvin Bagley, who was a good player, but over Luka Doncic. Terrible.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes me, just think about it and you're like, damn, like you really did wish that, you wish that they handled the situation a little bit better with him. And granted, I don't think that he's done anything that makes you think that like, you shouldn't believe that he has that talent. But granted, they're never in a national exposure, which leads to like some of the issues he has where he's not able to express himself. He's not able to get what he wants out of his situation. He's literally in no man's land when you're on the Kings team where you're already bottom dwellers and you're not getting that exposure, and then now you're also relegated to the bottom of the rotation is not fair to certain players that want to grow their career and still have that drive to want to push to grow their careers. You've seen his dad talk constantly about for years now. I think it's been 2 years since his dad came out and said he openly wants to be traded, and nothing came of that.
Yeah.
They did not even flinch. The Kings did not flinch, and they did not change anything for the situation for the guy. You know?
It's crazy because like we see these players openly demand a trade, like Ben Simmons, and everyone's talking about. I mean, of course, Ben Simmons on a different caliber than Marvin Bagley, but Marvin Bagley was a number 2 pick, and he's openly been like, please get me off this team, save me. He's liking tweets saying, get Marvin Bagley off this team. He's doing everything he can to try to get the spotlight on him, and yet no one cares. And most recently, this just happened as a few days ago. Now they have to take steps even further. That Marvin Bagley's agent recently put out this post saying, word for word, this is the quote: Sacramento has informed Marvin Bagley he is not in the opening night rotation, which is completely baffling. It's clear they have no plans for him in the future, and yet passed on potential deals at last year's deadline and this summer based on value. Instead, they chose to bring him back but not play him. A move completely contradictory to their value argument. This case study in mismanagement by the Kings organization. He's just putting the Kings organization on complete blast right now. And still, I think this came out like 3 days ago. Mm-hmm. No one's really talking about it still. No one cares.
I saw a report also that was mentioning that the Kings said they aren't actively looking to trade. and once again, it's like, what has this guy done for the Kings to treat him this poorly? And then granted, you gotta take a step back and think about it like this. There's other players around the league that see these things. We look at organizations, and I'll take the two organizations in New York. They're now two of the top organizations in the league. And the reason why they are like that is because of the empowerment that they've given their players. There was a time when they didn't have that aspect. Yeah. And the Kings are showing the reason why they're at the bottom of the league. It's never by chance. It's never by accident. It's because of what you as an organization choose to do is what leads to the type of situation you get to, right? And it sucks because Bagley's going to constantly look for a fresh place to start over, new face, new look, new environment. Like it would be the best thing for him, but the Kings really don't want him to have that.
It's mind-blowing. And like you said, it's really just it shows that the organization kind of doesn't know what they're doing, and it's just freeballing it, because we've seen plenty of times in the past where you have a player that's young, that hasn't done great in that situation, that requests a trade and gets it. And this happened multiple times for a player that I'm familiar with, in Dennis Smith Jr. When Luka Doncic was drafted, Dennis Smith Jr. realized that's not his team anymore. He wanted to be out. He got a trade to the Knicks. He was terrible on the Knicks. It did not work out. He wanted out. They traded him. He went to Detroit. It did not worked out. He's now in Portland and he's doing a little better. He got a contract invite, but like sometimes these guys need just a fresh start, and the Kings just refuse to give it to him. I'm sure that's going to hurt them in the future. It's crazy situation. No one really talks about it, but I want to see what happens. So next, we have Zion. Now, there's a report that said, it's a little contradicting in my opinion, of like, let me know if you read this the same way I did. There's a report saying that Zion reached north of 300 pounds this offseason. And then I saw another report saying that he reached 300 pounds. Now, when you hear north of 300 pounds, are you thinking like 380, 370? Or like he's hitting 300?
When I hear north, the problem is by leaving it that ambiguous, it allows for anyone to say whatever at that point, right? When I say north, when I'm thinking he's saying north of it, it has to be at least a good 10 pounds over.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not saying, you would say 300 and change if it was just 301, 302, 303. But when you say north of 300, that means it it was abundantly clear that he was over 300 pounds.
Yeah, exactly.
And everyone saw it and everyone noticed it. So
he had that recent commercial that came out, and he looked pretty big in there. And even I saw him in the training camp when he was doing his report or his interviews and all that. He looked pretty big, even though he definitely at that point he's not 300 or anything like that, but he's probably like 290. Like he looks bigger than what he was before.
Thing is, you look at even at training camp photos, like the guy looks like he's about to rip out of the shirt. Like he looks like he's gonna rip out of the shirt. That commercial you mentioned, also, he looked rather big. He looked bigger than even in that press conference. So I agree. I am not shocked by the thought of that or hearing that. And this is something I've been saying for the last couple of years. And it is a reason why you don't see a lot of players naturally just bulk up naturally. Like it takes time. Let me rephrase that. Obviously, I can't refute or say that they aren't bulking naturally, but I'm saying like naturally in the sense of they're doing a clean bulk. Most guys you don't see them doing a dirty bulk.
Yeah.
And Zion actually was one of those guys that openly spoke about doing a dirty bulk when he was in college, before he joined college in Duke, and said that he gained 100 pounds in 1 year. And that should have been the start of when the concerns happened, you know?
Yeah.
And you look at what Zion was at that moment and you look at what he is now, it's two completely different individuals. Then you look at when he was on Spartansburg and playing high school basketball, he looks like another individual at that point. So it really is, first, who is there to help Zion through this? Who is really the people that are around him making these decisions with him and helping him make the right decisions? He seems like a person that just does not have the guidance around the league, where you see a good support system that is there to say, hey, this is how we're training. Hey, this is the meal and diets and lifestyle changes we're going to need to have from you. This is what we're going to need from you on a training level, training standpoint. He just seems to not have that. And I don't want to be one of those individuals that say, hey, maybe it's his family or this or that. We don't really know enough to say that it is that, but it is concerning that you always hear now and every now and then it's starting to sound like a little bit of an Uncle Dennis situation with Kawhi, and you don't want to hear that, and you don't want to have that to be the reason why his career is derailed.
Yeah, at this point, it's becoming like Zion at 285, one of the heaviest players already in the NBA, doesn't need to bulk anymore. He's at the peak already, and he's just continuing on. It just shows, like we just talked about on the Kings, the mishandling of 1 year players. It's a successful organization goes to the offseason with their player and tells them what they need to do and how to get them there, and also helps them, sends trainers to them, do all these kind of things. We saw the Pelicans weren't really in communication with Zion and during this offseason. They didn't know that, or they didn't release that he got surgery and all this stuff. Like, it's a huge problem. I would love to see Zion get lighter, mainly because we see how great Zion can be, and at least at this moment, we've seen so many times him just getting injured, and look at his foot surgery. That mainly happens because the guy is so big already, and he's probably putting so much tension and stuff through his lower body by his super jumps and all that. It's gonna be another interesting thing to see going forward.
I want to add something to that too, and this is more about the injury. And you think about the Zion foot injuries; those things become recurring. If you can remember a few years back, we saw like when Kevin Durant was having issues with that, where they constantly would have to come back and he would have issues with it where they had to redo the drilling of like the nail that's in the foot because that is what is a necessary part of those foot fractures is that there's a nail in there. And we're talking about a guy that is obviously not as athletic and explosive to the rim as Zion. So think about how often we're probably going to hear about this foot is going to be a concern for him.
Yeah, this is crazy. Zion. I want to see Zion do so well. When he's healthy, this man is like 30 points and like 15 rebounds just easily. So dominant. We'll see how this progresses going forward. Something that I saw that was kind of interesting with Damian Lillard, because recent news we talked about in the past, and this whole offseason, the story is Damian Lillard is going to be wanting out of Portland. He's going to request a trade. He's unhappy. He's talked about it. And recently there was a report from The Athletic saying that he's not leaving and that he's recently developed a kinship with the new head coach of Chauncey Billups. And he's one of the biggest reasons why he has some renewed faith in the organization. And Damian Lillard looks like he's not going to be in the market anytime soon. For now.
Well, I will say this is if Damian Lillard decides to go down that path, and granted, I am one to believe and love the thought of hometown discounts, loyalty to your team, being team oriented. But if he continues that way and he wants to end his career there, almost chalk it up as the same thing with Bradley Beal is just going to be two great players that we're not going to see win a championship. And granted, it's where you rank that on your list as a player. I'm not upset if Damian Lillard doesn't want to put himself in a situation like that, but I don't think that the Blazers have the right personnel to make the right decisions that would put him in a championship situation.
Yeah, at this point, like you said, there's kind of no chance that the Blazers are going to beat a team like the Lakers, like Golden State, like Phoenix, like Denver. They have so many hoops, like Utah. They have so many hoops to jump over. They don't have the talent. They don't have the assets. As it doesn't matter if Chauncey Billups is the next Greg Popovich. They're not getting over those hurdles. And if he's completely fine with just staying there and being that player for Portland, good for him. I wish him the best of luck. I hope he wins one day, but I don't see it happening.
Agreed.
And for our next guy, now we've talked about in the past. I don't really want to touch too much on this guy because we've touched on him so much already. But by the minute, the news gets juicier and juicier. And over the last week, this is like a year's worth of drama that just happened. And I'm talking about Ben Simmons. Now, Ben Simmons, over the last week, he showed up to practice. And that first practice he was at, there's videos of him at that practice. And he's not looking engaged. They have a team huddle. And he's not joining the team huddle. He's just in the background dribbling his ball. And then after they do their cheer and hurrah and they finish their huddle, this man just walks to the locker room, leaves everyone alone by himself, not engaged at all at practice. The next day, they have a practice again. And reportedly, Ben Simmons refused to participate in a defensive drill, which then led to Doc Rivers saying, Ben Simmons, go home. You don't need to be here. You're not engaged. Leave. He's kicked out of practice. He's suspended. He's gonna miss their home opener and all that. Big news that happened. Now, even more. Just today, we record this on Thursday nights. We had a report from Shams saying that Ben Simmons is currently not mentally ready to play for the team and was receiving treatment on his back today due to the ramp up process. He will miss Friday's home opener versus the Nets and is not expected to play for an undetermined period of time. Now, you think that's where it would just end? No. We also, not too long ago, within the last hour, had Daryl Morey. It looked like he was on a Philly news station, 97.5, The Fanatic. So he went on there and he said, for quote, "Would you rather eliminate what people perceive to be a distraction, or would you rather have better playoff odds? I'll take the playoff odds. Whatever we have to deal with that helps the Philadelphia 76ers to win the title, we'll do it." And then Morey on the timeline. You're going to think I'm kidding, but I'm not. This could go on for 4 years. We're in this during the prime of Joel's career. Either Ben Simmons is playing for us, or we have to get back a difference maker. Now, Jeff, with all this that I just threw at you, actually, wait, there's one more thing. Ben Simmons also recently just listed his $5 million mansion in New Jersey after this 76ers suspension that he just had. His home was like, I think 26 miles from their arena, the Sixers arena, and he just he's putting his house for sale. You have Daryl Morey saying this could take 4 years. So maybe Ben Simmons needs to remove that listing. What do you think about all this situation?
Earlier in the week, tweeted about two guys. Talked about the two disgruntled superstars, two franchises, how they're both drastically different reasons, but however they're dealt is going to impact how the league will handle situations like this. This is so unprecedented. what Ben Simmons is doing, what Kyrie Irving is doing, that there's no real answer to either one of the situations. So right now, in real time, we're just watching and we're waiting to see who's going to step up and say, you know what, enough is enough and this ends now. Like, we either are going to walk away from this completely, or we're going to have at least the league intervene. And granted, the league cannot because of the CPA. But this is getting to a point where, like, you almost need for someone to come in and be that third party for this to make it go, because it's not going to get better. We've said this countless weeks in a row. We also say that we don't want to go too far into this. I'll put that first. But that we really don't know what's next in this situation, or how it could change and how it could drastically change. Each and every day there's something new about this. And now the new fabric to this, and this is from a source I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the name that I saw from, but Howard Eskin. I believe that he's a Sixers beat writer, and he was saying that sources was telling him that the belief is from the Sixers is that Ben Simmons, who just said that he is having back spasms and is mentally not prepared to play, is that he came in today and he said he had a back stiffness and mentally not prepared to play. And because of that, the Sixers do not really believe that this is real. And honestly, it's not something to throw out there and say that Ben Simmons is lying, or to say that Ben Simmons is telling the truth. None of us can assess that or tell if that's true. So it almost is like a checkmate. It's a checkmate at this point for the Sixers at this point, is that they have to figure out, hey, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do to make the situation a little bit better? And how are we going to make sure that we get over this as soon as possible? For him to say, Daryl Morey to be very tone deaf and say the same day as these reports are coming out that we're going to wait 4 years is just what I would say to the Sixers fans. Welcome to the hell that the Rockets fans had to feel for the last year and potentially even the last 2 years of what Daryl Morey was. You know, Daryl Morey is, I wouldn't say divisive, but he does put the team in a situation where they have to decide we're either going to go this way or the other, and does not make it easy for the team, you know?
Yeah.
And I questioned like the hire when they brought him in, and now I'm questioning it even more, because that is not something you want to have Doc going to shooting around tomorrow before they play the Nets and have to answer questions on, you know? And I just, you know, like Joel Embiid said, man, I don't care about that man. I don't care about the Sixers. I'm done talking about them. I'm done caring about this. They've made the decision to put him out indefinitely. So I'm ready to stop thinking about his situation as well.
Yeah, you already see that all these reporters are asking every single player, and I think Tobias Harris like had probably the best answer that I saw. That was just like, oh, like, yeah, we talked about it, and I'm gonna keep that between us because, you know, that's a conversation between two men that was private, and I'm gonna keep that as that. And I really respected that. I find it interesting, a conspiracy that I'm thinking that just makes sense with this whole Ben Simmons situation of, he says he doesn't want to play for the Sixers, and then he realizes he's not getting paid. So he goes, all right, I have to play for the Sixers. I have to report to training camp. So he reports to training camp, but he doesn't want to be there, but he's just there so he doesn't get fined and he doesn't lose his money. Next thing you know, they pull out the trap card. Suspension. All right, he's suspended. Not going to get paid. Realize, what can I do to still get my money but not play for this team? Injury. If this man is injured in a similar situation of like what the Spurs had with Kawhi, and Kawhi this whole time saying he's injured and the Spurs not believing him, you still have to pay the man. You still have to do all this. And now Ben Simmons is pulling out the reverse card and saying injury. Is this actually happening? I don't know. There's no concrete facts here, but I find that like an interesting little conspiracy in this whole situation. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, that was actually an element of the article that Ramon Shelburne wrote about the Ben Simmons drama, and saying that in between games 6 and 7 that he was talking about this back stiffness that he felt. Okay. And the team asked him to go see a masseuse, or he was told that he needs to go see a masseuse. Granted, I don't have the article right in front of me, so I'm not going off verbatim of what she said, but she mentioned that after that, they found out that Ben didn't go to the masseuse. Whoa. So his teammates started to believe, wait, so are you really having this issue? Are you not? Like, can we believe you? Can we trust you? Is this starting to be the sentiment that they were starting to feel? So much like we've been saying from the beginning, there's a little bit more deeper to this than we all know. And only people that know the real answers to all of this is the guys in the locker room and Ben Simmons and Doc
Yeah,
Rivers.
and Doc that's crazy. I didn't know about that. Wow. Yeah, this whole situation is madness. Next week, it's probably going to be even more madness. So I'm excited to touch on it there. I say, let's move on from Ben Simmons. Our next topic is a topic that it's a new segment that we're going to introduce, and it's called Team Spotlight, where we talk about a certain team in the NBA and we talk about how we think they're doing and how they can progress forward and just all the moves that they did. Let's talk about the team. And this team this week is the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, Jeff, talk to me about the Milwaukee Bucks.
You know, it hurts me to have to speak about the Milwaukee Bucks, but a good breakdown to give before we get into how I feel about them this year and their roster is you look at where they were last year and how they got to the point of at the end of the season they were able to become champions, right? Not only was that a confidence boost for their team to win the championship, it's a confidence boost for their superstar and their star to know that they've been a part of this roster, you know, their whole career, and they figured it out. It's almost, and I don't reckon it to go the same way, but it's almost of the same ilk of when Jordan figured it out and finally started winning championships, right? Is now that I stayed true to it, I figured it out, we found the path to make this work. It should be easier from this point on, right? And what led to even more confidence for this team, in my mind, is that they had two guys that went to the Olympics as well. They saw gold. They were able to build even more chemistry as a team through that, right? The team was even able in the offseason to bring in some key players like Grayson Allen. And, you know, they still have guys that need to come back, such as DiVincenzo, that is going to be an added punch to the team. You have Nora. I'm blanking for his first name,
Jordan.
but last year, Jordan Nora didn't really see a lot of playing time last year, as Brens Forb took a lot of that time, but now he's getting to fit in that role that Forbes had last year, and he's actually doing pretty well in that role. I like the confidence that I see in him coming off the bench and playing that way. Again, back on Grayson Allen, we spoke about him earlier in the podcast. I think that was the perfect type of pickup for the Bucks in the sense that they were able to get a little bit younger. They were able to get someone that fits right into the mold of their culture and someone that is from the get-go going to understand his role and understand that if I continue to do my role, we're going to be a successful team. And that goes to the last part I would say is that this team, with that confidence, with them knowing their roles and the cohesiveness that they have is what makes them such an unstoppable team. Is granted, I still don't think that they're going to make it out the East this year in my mind, but they're going to be the hardest team to play for anyone in the Eastern Conference this year.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, they're pretty damn good. Like there's just a few other things like to add on to like what you're saying. Like they brought in Grayson Allen, they re-signed Bobby Portis, who was pretty huge for them during the playoffs. They signed George Hill, who's a great backup that for them. So far in the preseason and the first game, didn't look the greatest and didn't have the best stat line, but we all know George Hill is actually a good player, and I expect him to step it up. They have Rodney Hood, They signed Semi Ojeleye, who a lot of Celtics fans were very high on, and then when he left, we're not high on. But now Bucks fans are very high on. So interesting to see how he fits in. You have, like you're saying, the newfound confidence of this team. You have Giannis, who seems so far in this preseason, in this first game, looking to have an improved 3-point shot, which, I mean, look at it. When you watch the playoffs last year, so often when you're defending Giannis, just back up completely and sit in the paint. If he makes the three, you live with it, but you don't want him to get into the paint because he's automatic there. And yet, still last year, even though that was the strategy, he still got in the paint somehow, and he still finished. And it was pretty magical to see that. So now, if he adds this 3-pointer, a consistent 3-pointer, it's a very scary team. And you mentioned the Nets. Now, it's pretty tough right now, especially I think with the Nets, with Kyrie Irving, are the clear favorites. They just have too much star power. But without Kyrie Irving, I think this conversation is a lot closer than a lot of people think. And I mean, this can go into what we just saw in this first game of Milwaukee pulled it out, and those guys, their main guys, looked extremely dominant. And it's the Milwaukee Bucks are a scary, scary team.
I agree. It definitely, without Kyrie Irving, it makes that gap a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
To making it out of the East, which, granted, I would say, much like you said, after seeing the first performance of the season of what they looked like, it does make you have that cause for pause, and try to figure out, okay, maybe you have to reassess this. It may be the Bucks. It will come through the Bucks to take the East, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that we're really early on into the season. There is going to either be a championship hangover, or there's either be a championship high. They will determine that, right?
Yeah.
And being who they are, knowing their team, it seems like it's going to be more of a championship high. But at some point, it's going to come back down to earth, and you're going to realize, okay, this is really the team that you're going to see. And that's when I really want to assess between those two teams, what does that look like? You just going a little bit back on those acquisitions and losses during the season. You mentioned that they brought in George Hill, Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye, that they re-signed Bobby Portis, bringing in Grayson Allen, like I mentioned before. One thing that I actually like for them as well was getting in a multi-year contract for their GM, John Horst. Mm-hmm. John Horst, honestly, you have to look at what they did as a team to really understand and be able to put the right pieces that always seem to know what they're supposed to do. That's not an easy thing, to have a team that has that type of chemistry that always seem to know. And then to something that Charles Barkley was mentioning on Tuesday after the game is when you have a star player that works as hard as that, it's going to make it easier for the other players to work hard as well. So I really do like what they did in the off season. It is definitely one of the lesser talked about off season, but it is just on brand on what type of team that they are. But I will leave off the key loss on this team, and we will see what that how that impacts this team in this year is PJ Tucker. what does that really mean for this team in the long run when they're making that playoff run? When they need that guy with that toughness, with that background that gives them that last punch? Because there's a lot of times where they needed that from PJ Tucker, and that's what helped them elevate to the level that they got to last
Yeah.
season.
No, he was a great acquisition, mid-season acquisition. If he wasn't there, I don't know if they win the championship last year. What I do find interesting, I feel like the PJ Tucker could potentially be a little bit, his impact could be a little bit overrated, because mainly we hear PJ Tucker, the Kevin Durant stopper. But if you really look at it, the Kevin Durant stopper still let Kevin Durant get 30, 40 points a game easily on him. Like, there is kind of no stopping a player like Kevin Durant and all that. PJ Tucker is very good. I feel like with someone like Grayson Allen, maybe you can slide some defensive pieces around. Maybe put Chris Middleton on more like a small forward type of person, and then you have Grayson Allen attacking that shooting guard or whoever they're playing against. I feel like that's probably where they're gonna move towards. But overall, like you mentioned, I think we're kind of seeing something with the Bucks that are similar to the Spurs, where when Spurs in their heyday, they were mostly like clear favorites a lot of the times, but yet in the offseason, you've never heard anyone talk about them. You never heard anyone hype them up, and they're always underrated. And then next thing you know, they're winning the championship and they look really amazing. The Bucks are kind of in that situation right now where they're just coming off a championship. They look great. They made amazing moves in the offseason. Exactly the moves that they needed. Are they the biggest moves? No, but they didn't have a lot of room or wiggle room to begin with. And they made some smart moves, and they're looking extremely dominant, but yet they're still kind of at the moment second fiddle to a Brooklyn Nets.
I do agree. I actually heard that over a week as well too. Is someone mentioned that they have that very Spurs-esque like organization, the way how they go about things, and then
I thought
not
that was
even
an
just
original
that.
take.
It definitely is not always always talked about, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like hearing you talk about it, hearing that also earlier in the week definitely made me go like, you know what? Like maybe
Yeah.
you are right about that, you know? But I do get jealous, I would say, of how cohesive they are as a team. And we'll see like what that really means, because it's definitely gonna be a season that we're gonna have a lot of more bend don't break situations happening, because we're gonna see lesser of these situations with COVID, where we only see where we may see an incomplete roster. Some days we have to set off some type of guys, load management. It's always going to play a part into the season, but at this point, but we know more more or less of who's going to be on the court when they play these teams, and who's going to possibly be out there to play against the Bucks. So I would love to see what the Bucks look like under that circumstances, and then we could assess around 40 games out what they really look like, and truly say, hey, you know what? Maybe this is another repeat. This is the road to a repeat for them this year.
Yeah. No, completely agree. This is going to be a fun season. There's a lot of really good teams competing for one goal, and a lot of the previous years it was just two teams, whoever teams LeBron is on and we're in the Warriors, and that's pretty much it for a decade. And now we actually have some really exciting storylines coming in basketball and just games in general. I think this is actually a good transition into our next topic, and just like opening night games that we saw standout performances. I do want to get your thoughts on the Nets and Bucks game. We didn't get to talk on it privately, so I want to hear. Now that you have some time to sit on it, what were your thoughts on the game?
In the words of Aaron Rodgers, RELAX. Relax. That's what I would say to Nets fans first. Relax. It is game one. Granted, definitely a statement game when you look at who the Bucks are, what we were chasing last year, and the roadblock that we had going up against them. Definitely an emotional high out also for both teams. You know, being that the Bucks are getting their rings, they're going to be up front of their fans. They're going to want to give them a great performance. And then on the Nets side of it, the Nets are coming for revenge. They're coming for redemption. They're missing Kyrie, which is, and you can't minimize that. That affects the team. They are emotionally missing a piece, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But when they went out onto the court, they're not thinking that way. They are thinking, you know what? This is the guys that we're playing with, the guys that we have here, right? But another aspect to that, Harden's back healthy. That's another emotional thing to keep in mind. It was leading to being a very emotional type of game. And with that in mind, there was a lot of newness that was on the net side, and it was the complete opposite of what I was just praising the Bucks for having, is cohesiveness and being able to be familiar with everybody and have that chemistry. In the early parts of the game, you could clearly tell that the Nets were trying to find rhythm of what works and doesn't work, and it kind of felt like the Nets were playing a preseason game where throughout the whole game, James Harden was trying to get Nick Claxton into the game, integrate him into the game, and make him feel a little bit comfortable. It just was not working. It was not working. James Harden was having a hard time early on as well, finding his shot. Kevin Durant was missing shots that you thought he's known for making, right? Yeah. And then there was extended periods where he actually sat out, and I was actually wondering why. And it led me to going into it thinking like, hey, well, the Nets are going to drop the ball on this one. And, you know, in the second half, the second quarter, near the end, the Nets make their run, and you start to see a little bit more cohesiveness. But this now leads me into why it got to that point, is the biggest acquisition for the Nets at this point is Patty Mills. Him coming into the game, having 21 points, going 7 of 7 from the field, from the 3-point line, was an added punch that the Nets needed at that moment. So the Nets started running that in the second half, in the later stages of the first half, and they looked comfortable. They looked good. They were starting to trim down that lead, running out a lineup of Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Patty Mills, and Nick Claxton, and Blake Griffin, actually. And then we go right into the second half. Second half was fairly bad for the Nets. And because of that, once again, I knew that there was going to be an initial run that came there, but the Nets just did not match that intensity or that energy that the Bucks came with in that game. And then those issues with chemistry was coming out again, where they were trying to find out what fits and what doesn't fit. So in the grand scheme of it, my issue that I was having is a little bit of with coaching. I had this issue last year, and I thought maybe this would be something that they would address over the year, is Steve Nash is known or has shown to be in his time in his tenure of being a coach, one that allows for players to resolve issues on the court on their own. And I'm not against that, but I do think that it is the coach's job to intervene in that and say, you know what, we're losing tempo, we're losing control of this game. I need to take a timeout, regroup, and bring them back in. That was a big issue I was having. Second issue I was having with coaching was Nets was putting out a rotation, a completely new rotation that was remaining too tight, entirely too tight for me. You have guys like Javon Carter, James Johnson, Paul Millsap saw a few minutes, but also Patty Mills, and then the starters. And those were the guys that were getting all the minutes. It was a completely tight rotation for a game where you already lost control and you weren't really taking the timeouts to regain it. I was just so shocked that there was never really a big adjustment to try to fit and compete with your opponent at that moment. So those two things, and then you got to give props to the Bucks. The Giannis looked like an even better version of himself. Able to have fluidity with his shot taking and shot selection, and then also be able to look smooth on his free throws and his 3-pointers that he was taking on that game. So those are my key takeaways from that game.
A quick question. So, like, I also, after this game, I went on the Nets subreddit and I want to see what people are saying. And a big consensus was a lot about Steve Nash, which you brought up. Does a performance like this change your mind about this coaching staff and Steve Nash in particular?
And I don't have a problem with Steve Nash. I do think that I have a problem with having a coach that inexperience having to lead a championship aspirations, right? Steve, this is the second time I think I've seen, and not second time, but it's over several games now. But head to head, going up against the Bucks, I just don't like the fact that Steve Nash is being thoroughly outcoached by slightly little. It's not like it's over maneuvering to be better. That Mike Budenholzer is doing to be out coaching Steve Nash. So I saw it happen later in the season, as I believe we didn't have Kyrie. I'm trying to remember last year, the regular season matchups. But in those games, there was clearly issues that was with the rotation, choosing to rest players in games that impacted your seeding for the playoffs was another reason why I had an issue with that, and at the timing for that as well, because I think that affected the Nets' confidence even going into the playoff series. Yeah. And then when we get into the playoffs, you saw Mike Budenholzer, who is infamously known for making no adjustments, make the slightest adjustments, and it threw the whole Nets coaching staff in disarray. So I do have an issue with inexperience. I don't have an issue with Steve Nash per se, but I wish there was someone that could come in there that was heavily defensive minded, that could come in there and have that experience and speak to this team and bring out that effort for them to be a little bit more defensively sound, but also to adjust with the changes that are happening for the team or against the team.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's with players like Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and Harden, coaching just kind of doesn't matter at a certain point. But like you're saying, when it gets to these really important games and playoff games, coaching comes in pretty big. And having that experience, even though I mean Steve Nash is one of the greatest basketball minds out there, I'm sure though still the lack of actual coaching experience uh can really hurt the Nets in this situation. And I want to get your take on it. And it's interesting. Um Something that I found when even just looking at like the box score of this game, just looking at your bench, other than Patty Mills, your entire bench only scored 4 points. It's like James Johnson played 21 minutes, 1 point. LaMarcus Aldridge, 16 minutes, 1 point. Remember, this is the thing. These guys didn't actually really take a ton of shots, but you're just playing that many minutes. And it's surprising when you have players like James Harden and Kevin Durant on the floor. Like they just have a gravitational pull to them, and they will leave players like James Johnson and LaMarcus Aldridge open, and it should allow them to have more opportunities. But that was something that really like surprised me, and I want to keep an eye out for the future and just see like this Nets bench, can they be better? Because Patty Mills was amazing, but he was the only one.
So it goes back to two things that we've had discussions about on the podcast, offline. First, you don't discredit what you're missing in Kyrie first.
Yes.
So the fact that Kyrie's not there changes up what that rotation would look like. The facts are, if Kyrie is back, he's in the starting lineup. You have someone like Patty Mills that's able to stay with that second unit and create for those guys, like you mentioned, like LaMarcus Aldridge, like for even to create for Kevin Durant, for Paul Millsap, and create spacing and make it a little bit more cohesive, whatever they're doing, right? But the way how he was needed to be utilized in this game did not speak to the benefits of why, if Kyrie was there, right? Yeah. So he was spending a lot more time with those starters than he was actually spending with the bench players, because he was that battery pack for the Nets. That got them back into the game, that was able to be that spark plug and like just knock a couple shots that regained some confidence for the team, right? So then you see that they would trot out the bench mob. Let's put it as that, the bench mob. And these guys are going up with James Harden, and James Harden's looking to find his shot and get into the game. And like I said, was constantly looking for Claxton to try to get him also into the offense. But I don't think, and we can't depend on the thought that Kyrie will come back, but I think that the second part that I'm about to say is what's going to help out and make this a little bit easier to transition these players into actually being more solid off of the bench and give that punch. Joe Harris has shown to me that some moments are going to be too big for him, right? And these are the moments against teams like the Bucks that are defensively sound, that have players that are of almost the same ilk as you, but they have another gear, or they have another dimension or layer to their game that makes them able to stay on the court, that makes that Joe Harris should not be on the court. So because of that, I'm saying, and I mentioned this when we brought up the Nets earlier in the year, is that I think that Joe Harris should be on the bench. And you find someone to fit in to that three. I think that the most sound thing is drop down KD to the three, bring in Blake into the four, if you want Blake to still play the 5, slide him up to the 5, have Paul Millsap play the 4, and then that be your starting lineup. Because then you get more spacing. You get you have not necessarily tall bodies, but bigger bodies on the court, and guys that if they just put a little bit more effort to it, the defense would be a little bit better. It's honest to say that Joe Harris is kind of like a doormat at this point, because you just could walk right through him, like in the offense. In the Nets defensive scheme. And another thing too, the Nets switch everything. So because they're switching everything, every team knows that they could create their own mismatches. Where I'm going to switch, I'm going to have Joe Harris play me, and I'm going to blow by him. I'm going to just always choose whichever defensive inefficiency that the Nets have on the court. I'm going to go to that, because they're always going to switch. They're always going to switch their men.
I think like you're saying, the impact of Kyrie is being understated right now, because if you have a player like Kyrie, this kind of changes your rotation, changes everything. It also just changes the way that everything flows, even the defense and all that. Because defense kind of doesn't matter as much when your offense is flowing so well. And as of right now, you kind of need that defensive help. And without Kyrie, that does make it pretty tough.
I agree.
I think so. Let's move on to some of the key players that we saw in this offseason. Before I list, I have a pretty long list of guys that I was extremely impressed by. Now, before even going into any of this, I will say these last 2 days of regular season games really impressed me, and just seeing the amount of talent on every single team, like, the NBA future is in good hands. A lot of these younger players are showing out. It's extremely exciting. Do you have some players that stood out to you?
Oh yeah. So I'll run through them quickly. Obviously you got to go off once again. Giannis being Giannis, being that MVP type player, and looking even better. Definitely stand out. Performance of the first games that we saw. Also, Bielitsa. That was something that you knew Bielitsa could score, but the way how he was doing it, able to actually be an integral part of the offense in specific parts of that first game, was something I was delightfully surprised about, and happy to see that the Warriors have that dimension of someone that could pick and pop for you. Also, if the moment's getting hot, you don't have to worry. He could still hit that 3. He hit one late in the game against the Lakers, and then you got to go into your Thursday night, your Wednesday night games. Julius Randle proving that this ain't a fluke. This put some respect on my name. He said is dropping 35 in a dead leg game where you're going into 2 overtimes. You need and Julius Randle does that spin move and get the layup into get the crowd going crazy in the Garden, was something that I love to see. But then I look on the other side of it. You look at what Jaylen Brown was able to do with 46 points, another guy that stand out. And then 2 other individuals. Ja Morant looks just like Ja Morant of last year, even better once again too. And then I had to say this one. Even in a losing effort, Chris Duarte, he looked impressive. You heard the Hornets. If you watch the highlights, you listen to the Hornets announcers even say that Chris Duarte looked like a 10-year veteran out there draining threes, and then he was draining them till the end of the game. There was moments he looked like he was pulling the game away for the Pacers, even when they blew the 21-point lead. That led you to believe that this guy knows what he's doing out there. And those were my guys, at least.
I love that you brought up Duarte. This pretty much this entire time we've been doing this podcast, I've been singing Duarte's praise. He's one of my favorite players coming out of this draft. It's crazy. Like he's such a good player. Like coming into this draft, everyone was like, all right, what can this man do? And they look at him. He can do everything and everything really well. All right. Why isn't he a top 5 pick? The guy's 24 years old, so he's an older rookie, and he's expected to come into the league right away and perform well. And literally the first game I watched of him, I think even in the summer league, it's just like, this guy is different than everybody else. And it's extremely impressive to see a rookie in his first regular season game showing out and putting up, 27 points.
Yes.
I also saw that was a Pacers record for a rookie, and in opening night, and like that man's a beast. I mean, you have your players like Sabonis and Brogdon; they always did well. That's expected, but Duarte, that man, someone to look out for. I love that you brought up Julius Randle. Now, as a Knicks fan, I must say, I wanted to see him show out again because in the playoffs, the man was not great and it kind of like got you a little bit worried. But after having some time to think about it, it's like, is Julius Randle for real? My thought process was we have a 72 game sample size of him being amazing. And then we have a 5 game sample size of him being terrible. And that 5 game was the most recent sample size, most recent thing that happened. But like, I still take the 72 game sample size, and like, I'm very happy to see that this man it wasn't a fluke, and this man has been working even harder this offseason, and he looked very impressive. Jaylen Brown, when I saw Jaylen Brown was going to play in that game yesterday, I was scared. Jaylen Brown is so good, and because he was out for COVID for the entire preseason. And as soon as I saw Jaylen Brown was playing, I was like, now this game's in risk. Something could happen. And this man instantly came out blazing hot, making every three. That logo 3 that he had to get the game very close to a tie in the last like 30 seconds was mind-blowing. I'm actually very lucky because I have Jaylen Brown and Julius Randle from my fantasy basketball team. And so if anything, I was loving it at the same time, but I was also hating it. So I was rooting against Jaylen Brown, but I was also loving it. Some other guys I want to bring up, man, LaMelo Ball, year 2, that man balled out. Like you said, they came back from that huge deficit from 23 down to the Pacers. He had 31 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. His swing skill coming into the NBA, everyone knew LaMelo Ball can pass. Everyone knew that LaMelo Ball can do layups and do all these crazy stuff. But his shooting was in question. This game, he shot 7 of 9 from 3-point range. This man, he looked like he's been putting some work in. We had Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine definitely showed that he's not a fluke, as well as Julius Randle. But like Zach LaVine, 34 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting 64% from the field. Now, I will ask you, what did you think about the Bulls in their offense against Detroit in that first game?
It definitely was interesting to see that it wasn't as fluid as in the preseason, but I think that it's just something that's going to come with time for that team. But granted, um, I love what I was seeing out of Zach LaVine, and to see that Zach LaVine, even if uh, and granted, there's a better team, so this may not have to happen every game. But I almost see it as equally of what I'm seeing out of the Knicks. Right, is you have Kemba Walker not to be superstar Kemba Walker or quote unquote superstar Kemba Walker, where he needs to come out every single game and give his heart out and drop 35 or 40 out of every game. But if it's necessary, he can, right? That is what I'm seeing out of Zach LaVine. And in that first game, they needed that, right? But there's going to be games where DeMar DeRozan is hot. There's going to be mismatches when they're playing with Vucevic where he's going to get hot. You have Caruso, who is looking amazing off the bench. And then you also have Lonzo. And, I like the fact that it's a pick your poison type of situation with that roster. And I just want to see, we'll revisit this 20, 30 games down the road and say, you know what? Maybe I can say that they are a real deal team. Right now, it's still a little bit more of like, let me see, let me figure it out. But I definitely like them. I mentioned that they're one of my surprise teams that I think could be right up there in conversation of top of the East. But I don't want to say that that is something I'm going to hold my head or put 100% certainty that they're going to do that at this moment.
Yeah, I thought I definitely want to see them playing more games together and actually have some chemistry. Because obviously in that first game there was times where it looked a little sluggish and it didn't look as fluid as you would want. But I definitely see with time that's going to happen. So that's, like you said, great team to look forward to look back on. Someone that I was actually very impressed by. Now, he's a rookie. He didn't have the greatest preseason, even summer league. People were kind of a little bit concerned by him. But Evan Mobley against the Memphis Grizzlies looked very good. He was the third pick in the draft. A lot of expectations, but he had 17 points, 9 rebounds, and the biggest stat I saw, 6 assists. Now, watching some of the highlights of this game, what impressed me most about Evan Mobley were those passes that he could find. He was doing some like really technical and just like advanced passes from like the post. He had a really good like passing to their new center, Jared Allen. It actually worked really well, and I really do like him at the power forward position. And I was a little bit concerned when they signed Lauri Markkanen. They signed they gave a big contract to, I just said his name, Jared Allen.
Yep. And he showed out last night as well.
He did. But like they looked great together, and I think Evan Mobley at the power forward position is going to look really well, because looking at him on the floor too, the man is so skinny that if he was playing center right now, he'd get demolished. So I think against power forwards, he's with his height is definitely gonna help him there. You mentioned John Morant. John Morant is crazy. It's actually kind of interesting looking at his numbers. Really dropped last season, or his 3-point numbers has really dropped. Like he wasn't as good as he usually was. I think he had some like injuries and all that. But I was very high on John Morant last season, and then he didn't get to my expectations, but I do have those expectations again for him this year. I think he's going to be amazing. I was really sad when he got stolen from me in fantasy basketball. It was terrible. Guys, the Minnesota Timberwolves, extremely impressive. They're semi big three, and Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, they all really looked amazing. And I'm happy to see like a healthy Karl Anthony Towns and 30 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, extremely efficient shooting, 11 of 15 from the field. Anthony Edwards, 29 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. He shot 50% from 3 on 12 attempts, which another guy with his swing skill coming to NBA, can he be efficient? Can he be consistent shooting threes? And year 2, he's looking really good so far. D'Angelo Russell,
let me ask,
really good. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question before we move on with the Timberwolves. Is I love, if you look at the stat line, that they were spreading the wealth. Everyone got in on the game, and everyone was able to put their stake their own claim into the game with at least getting one bucket, right? Pat Beverly was suspended, so he missed that first game. But that's another addition to that team. Do you believe that the Timberwolves are a playoff team this year?
I would say they're definitely a play-in team. So that's saying that they're at least we're going to be the 6th seed, or no, the 7th seed, at least the 7th seed. I definitely see them in that 7 to 10 range. I don't know about any higher, just because there's just so many good teams in the West. Like I mentioned, just so top 6 are safe. You have the Warriors, the Lakers, the Clippers. Maybe you can put them there. Well, I'll leave them down. So, so the Warriors, Lakers, Phoenix. In Phoenix, you have Denver, Utah. That's 5 right there. Portland, 6. Mm-hmm. So then now you're having, I would say, the Clippers now with Paul George, and I think they're still going to be decent. But then it's like going after that, they're kind of in their own tier with, like, I'd say Memphis. Like, I think Memphis is going to be good this year, but are they going to be better than all these other teams? I don't know. I think Minnesota's a fun team to look forward to looking at in the future, but it's just the NBA is so competitive now. Even though they have these great players, is it enough? I wonder. You have some D'Lo stuff happening. D'Lo's looking nice again. Maybe Ben Simmons candidate for Minnesota. Maybe they're calling Philly after this game, be like, "Hey, did you see D'Angelo Russell looked really good that game?" I don't know. What do you think?
You've heard this conversation for a while now about bringing in D'Lo into this team, bringing D'Lo into a trade package for Ben Simmons, but I just don't think the T-Wolves have enough to trade back to the Sixers that the Sixers are looking for. They're clearly overvaluing their talent, but at the same time, I don't think that D'Lo is a fair trade. 1 for 1.
No way.
It would not be a fair trade for Ben Simmons. So, but granted, I am happy with how they look right now. I think we're on lockstep on them being a play-in team. I'm happy if they got to that point, because that's something, only being in a playoff appearance in the last 18, 19 years. That's something that you want to have happen for Minnesota, to have that opportunity to rep their team, so to speak, their fans, because it's been a while since they've had a product that they could cheer on.
Yeah. I think the last time they made the playoffs was Tom Thibodeau was the coach.
Exactly. And that was the first round exit.
It was. It's Minnesota. We'll see how they do in like 3-4 years. Maybe they'll be a little more interesting. Anthony Edwards, I would say I wasn't very high on him coming into the NBA, because all those reports saying like he doesn't really like watching basketball film, and there's a lot of stuff of like, does he even want to be playing? Is he passionate about basketball and all that? But the man got some talent.
You know what? I will say, and remember, I said this in our first initial podcast, is that I hate pre-draft analysis because they miss out on essential parts of people sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I think when asked those type of questions, he was, knowing him now, he was definitely playing around or he was joking. The guy loves to have a good time. He definitely was playing it off as maybe a little bit more of as a joke, or not taking it to the level that he knew that this was going to impact him that much, right? So now knowing that, I think he would have answered that. If knowing that, what he knows now, I don't think he would answer in that same way. He would probably say something along the lines, yes, maybe I'm not the guy that's going to sit down and watch film all the time, but I do believe in my craft. I believe in my game. I know what I'm doing out there.
Yeah, like you're saying, we see the interviews that he's doing now, and I'm sure if you didn't see how he was, a lot of things can be taken out of context. And
Exactly.
so yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that was a situation. Yeah, Anthony Edwards, the man is nice. The man is nice. Some other players that I was looking forward to see a jump from this season was Tyrese Maxey, especially with no Ben Simmons. I wanted to see if Tyrese Maxey is starting, how does he do? And his first game, although it was against the Magic, looked pretty good. 20 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. The man was pretty good, and Korkmaz also coming off the bench, he was amazing. Maybe we're counting out Philly too much because they don't have Ben Simmons, but I mean, hey, there's still a good team.
They looked good in their first game, in their first initial game.
Yeah, they definitely did. The Magic, now looking at the Magic, they actually had they didn't have the greatest game. They struggled a lot. Jalen Suggs, I was hoping for a good game from him. He struggled, but he's a rookie. It's his first game, to be expected. But the player that did stand out to me, Mo Bamba. I mentioned him a little bit before. He didn't get that contract extension. He really has not performed well. But this season, he's looking like he's revived his career. And this man has been on a blocking spree all in preseason. And in this game as well, he had 4 blocks. And his 3-point shot still looks good. He made 3 or 4 from 3-pointer. And I'm pretty impressed by Mo Bamba.
I agree. It goes back to what we were talking about, the DeAndre Ayton conversation earlier, when we mentioned that sometimes it takes a little bit for big men to really get to their ceiling. And maybe that's what this is for Mo Bamba at this point. And if it means that he has to move to another team and figure that out, I would be happy and welcome the thought of that for him. I know they extended Wendell Carter, so it may seem like that is going to be the case, but who knows?
Yeah, well, we'll see. Maybe they do a trade. I mean, now he's going to have some trade value, so that is something to keep an eye on. And just realized we're at 2 hours, so next couple guys, I'm going to go very quick. Devin Vassell, extremely impressed by. I've been very high on him for a while, but 19 points off the bench, that was great. Harrison Barnes, we kind of forget that this man played. Well, he was a key piece to the Warriors when they were coming up, and this man had 36 points on 10 of 19 shooting, 8 from 11 from 3-pointer, 9 rebounds. Extremely impressive. Rashawn Holmes just got paid, and as soon as he gets paid, this man has 21 points, 11 rebounds. Very impressive. Real quick, Jordan Poole. this man, he's kind of showing like it's not a fluke. And this year, he's really coming out. And when I was watching, I think the earlier the game, it seemed like he was struggling a little bit, but nice to see him close it out. Now, some stinker that I kind of wanted to point out was looking at the Lakers. And Russell Westbrook really struggled his first game. Didn't look great. Looking at his numbers, he was 8 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Like, those aren't the typical numbers we see from Westbrook. 4-13 from shooting. And then their big acquisitions this offseason. Everyone's talking about Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard. You got Rondo back, Malik Monk. They're also kind of stinkers that first game. Are we overrating the Lakers? Do we just hear these giant names and think they're gonna be amazing? But these guys have aged a lot. What do you think about that, Jeff?
I said it, and I mentioned this earlier. The Aaron Rodgers quote: "Relax." But relax in a different way.
Yeah,
it definitely is a different frame of mind for me on this situation. Is that I do have concerns, and I've had concerns since they brought in Westbrook, that how does he fit into being that third man into the rotation, because he's never really been asked to be that primary ball handler where he's not really creating for himself. Yes, Westbrook can make assists. I'm not refuting that. I don't think anyone is refuting that. But he's always out to make plays for himself. And this is the first time in his career where it's going to be largely about two other individuals that he's going to be making plays for, or making it easier for them. And granted, most of the time, he's not even going to have the ball, and he's going to have to try to make decisions to make better plays for those two individuals. And we're going to see him struggle with the thought of that and try to figure that out. Shaq said this after the game, and it kind of, comes off to people as a shock, but it's the truth, is that Westbrook is relegated to being a role player at this point in his career. He is a high value and a high profile role player, but he is a role player at this point in his career. You could call it a big three all you want, but the guy is a role player. He has to understand what his role is to this team, and that's when they'll get the best out of the situation. Once again, we did mention all of those parts of the bench that you mentioned that was supposed to come in there and be saviors for the Lakers. And we realized that in watching this game that there is deficiencies in what they do. And what the Lakers are going to lose from the guys that they have now is the defensive side of the game. So I think they'll figure it out a little bit better, but it's going to be, I might have to revise my who's making it out of the West now, looking at it after watching that first game. But granted, only one game. Allow the season to marinate a little bit, and then I'll let you know if I got to change that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. For all the listeners, I mean, we're only going off of one game right now. And this is a brand new team. They have a lot to figure out. Definitely not time to freak out yet, but it is interesting to see so far how it's working out. I mean, LeBron and Anthony Davis were great. I thought what was interesting you're saying about like Westbrook's a role player now. And but you think about it, you're paying your role player $30+ million a year. Like, it makes it tough when you want to when you want to win a championship. You're not paying your role player $30 million+ a year. So yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, we'll see how the experiment works out. There's still plenty of time, a long season, but we'll see how it goes. And then I won't rave about it too long. But man, the Knicks, a lot of NBA media sleeping on him. And all right, so the first preseason game that came out, I watched it. I came on this podcast. I was going crazy. Then there was 3 other ones, and then I didn't get to express it on the podcast, but I kind of slowed down. I was like, now I've seen when this offense kind of looks a little sluggish, and there's some problems when they miss shots. But overall, this team is deep, and just like they have a lot of players that their 12th man, their 13th, 14th man, like those guys can also play, and it's exciting to see the Knicks this season actually play without a Elfrid Payton as their point guard. And as much as I liked Reggie Bullock, this man cannot dribble to save his life. I think it came out there was a leak of the Hawks scouting report that was from the playoffs, and literally the entire report was like, guard Julius Randle with as much as possible, and then don't even look at Elfrid Payton, and then just get up on Reggie Bullock and allow him to dribble the ball because he's not. And then we just hide Trae Young on him, and that's the series. Not going to happen anymore when you have Evan Fournier able to replacing Reggie Bullock. And this man scored 32 points. He was actually the reason why they won in overtime. He was a huge reason why, because he was probably one of the only guys making giant shots. Julius Randle also was good, but I mean, you could tell the man was gassed. Now, should that game have gotten to overtime when they were like up like 10 points with like a minute left? No, there was a lot of defensive lapses and some big shots made and all that. But I would have to say, still impressed by them sticking it out. You know, I'm sure Kemba Walker is not going to make that same mistake of, you're up by 3, the last possession, let me guard the rim instead of guarding Marcus Smart on the 3-point line. I'm sure he's not going to make that mistake again. But extremely impressed. Also, I will say, RJ Barrett, he wasn't actually looking that great at the start, but I think what people aren't talking about enough is that defense that RJ Barrett played on Jason Tatum. Because Jason Tatum had a pretty bad game. The man shot, I think, 30 shots and made
7 of 30.
7 of 30. He did
2
not
of 15 from 3.
2 of 15 from 3. Now, we all know Jason Tatum is not going to have many nights like that. But I will say a big reason why he was having that kind of night is because RJ Barrett was on him the entire night, and he was playing some really impressive defense. Now, should Jason Tatum taken all those shots? I don't think so. Probably give it to the man Jaylen Brown, who was on fire and couldn't miss. But extremely impressive. And even for like the Celtics of like Robert Williams, that man was extremely impressive. Just a lot. The whole team made a lot of big shots. I will say, Dennis Schroeder did not look great. The man looked really bad. He missed some giant shots for them at the end of the game. You can tell the reason why a lot of teams kind of didn't want him this offseason. And there's still a lot of time for him to show out and do better. Last guy I actually want to touch on, I forgot about. Now, it's Mitchell Robinson. This man is a game changer for the Knicks, mainly because their other centers kind of don't play well against bigger centers. And that's like Nerlens Noel. Like looking at that Hawks series last year, I still probably think the Knicks lose it, but I don't think the Knicks lose it in that fashion if Mitchell Robinson is there, because literally that entire time, Clint Capella could do whatever he wants onto Nerlens Noel, because Nerlens Noel is 6'11", but extremely skinny. Now you got Mitchell Robinson coming back up. He's 7'1". This man has 17 rebounds this game, 5 offensive rebounds, which were huge. Watching the game, you can see the Celtics offense, when Mitchell Robinson's on the floor, could not get to the rim. And when they got close to the rim, they passed the ball because just that presence of Mitchell Robinson being there to block it was so huge for them. And then as soon as he left the game, you saw them, they attacked the paint again and they got a bunch of layups. And that's how it went. But overall, extremely impressive. I actually went a lot longer on the Knicks than I wanted to, but I can't help myself.
Hey, no, it was an impressive game. It definitely was a gritty one. So I like that we spent some more time talking about it. Another aspect of the game that I know I tweeted about this as well is that the game looked like in the beginning stages of the second overtime that it was getting out of hand of the Knicks, right?
Oh yeah.
And there was 2 plays that swung momentum in my mind. Dennis Schroeder coming down the lane, missing a point blank layup.
Yep.
Then going on, the Knicks rebound it. They lose the ball to Jaylen Brown getting the ball, which at that moment is definitely a confidence booster for Jaylen. Jaylen, instead of taking the point blank layup that Dennis Schroeder just took, he decided, let me get some lift off my legs and dunk it. Being that you just went through a 2 overtime game, he missed a dunk. And that swung momentum in my mind. And, you turn that around. You have Julius Randle, like I mentioned earlier, do a spin move, go right to the rim and hit that layup. And it was over. It was over at that point. They could have just ended the game at that moment. And you knew that the Celtics just did not have, honestly, the energy to keep going.
Yeah, that overtime was so exciting because both these teams were just so exhausted. You saw players diving on the floor constantly, losing the ball. There's a lot of sloppy play just because they're so tired, but it's exciting because every possession really matters. And seeing Dennis Schroeder miss that layup, that changed the entire game. Knicks made some big shots when they needed to. I honestly, when it went to second overtime, I thought it was over. I was like, they blew the game. That's it. And they pulled it out. And definitely impressed. I am very happy because I kept the receipts. I remember when the schedule came out. When the schedule came out and I saw Celtics versus Knicks, I went to the Celtics subreddit and I saw everybody on there be like, oh, we're versus the Knicks. Easy 1-0. Easy 1-0. This is going to be no problem. And then I went again last night and I saw them crying and it made me a little bit happy. Now, if the Knicks lost that game, I would have been crying. It would have been terrible. But that's just the way it goes. We'll watch more of this series. This matchup is pretty exciting to see. The East is extremely exciting. I mean, it's like we know who the top teams in the East are of the Nets and the Bucks, but then the next tier is, in my opinion, extremely close. And I wouldn't be surprised anyway. I wouldn't be surprised if you see the Knicks as the 3rd seed, or you see the Knicks as the 7th seed, or you see Atlanta as the 4th seed or the 7th seed. And with any of these teams, I can see them like 4 through 7. The Atlanta, Knicks, Celtics, Hawks, or I already said Hawks, Miami, like all those, even Philly, like all those teams, I can see them like, they wouldn't be surprised if I saw them in any placing. So exciting
Agreed.
stuff.
And seeding does not legitimately mean that you're not having a great season this year with the Eastern Conference, because I think there's an abundance of teams that could be vying for a 50-win season this year in the East.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's going to be exciting. All right, real quick, wanted to touch on the top 75 or the 75th anniversary list just came out. Now, you might think it is 75 players. It's actually 76 players because there was a tie for one of the stuff. So it's 76 players make the top 75 list. And now, There are some interesting, or what I wanted to touch on were the players that are currently playing in the NBA that I thought we should talk about, or not talk about, but I want to point out. So Giannis made it. Carmelo Anthony, I thought was very surprising, also made the list. Stephen Curry, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, James Harden, LeBron, Kyrie, Damian Lillard, another surprising person that made the top 75 list, in my opinion. Just in terms of accolades, like the man's an amazing player, but like in terms of accolades, he doesn't have a lot. Chris Paul, and another surprising, Russell Westbrook. Even though this man won all these MVPs and all that, still, Russell Westbrook is there. Now, Jeff, we talked a little bit about this before the podcast started. There's some snubs. There's one main guy that you brought up that was a snub, and that's Kyrie Irving. He's not on this list. What do you think?
I will not say that I'm upset that Kyrie's not on it, because I think there's guys that are even more deserving of it that got snubbed in my mind. I'm looking at a list, and I actually would want to say I have someone that I right now want to fight for to be on the list rather than some of the guys that's on the list. I'm assuming that this list is comprised of accolade. It's comprised of sheer dominance of what you meant to the league, and the work of body that you carried, right?
Yeah.
Because of that, and I spoke about this person earlier in the pod, I believe Dwight Howard, there's no way you leave him off this list.
Yeah.
I think the guy's career has been minimized because of what happened in the second half of his career, but it is almost a joke to not think about what Dwight was able to do with the first half of his career and how dominant, how he was a leader. He was unequivocally a leader for the team that he was on. And for him to be left off the list, I can try to pull up some accolades, because as we look at it and we look at most individuals that are on this list, it's because they're accolades, right? And they have an extensive list of accolades. Dwight Howard is right up there. Dwight Howard, and a lot of people forget about this. I believe Dwight Howard had 3 consecutive Defensive Players of the Year. He's an 8-time All-Star player. He's an 8-time All-NBA player. He's a 5-time All-Defensive player. He's a 3-time, like I mentioned, Defensive Player of the Year. And there was some years he was in the MVP. He was in the MVP talks, right? So for him to be left off that list definitely is something that it's like I am a little upset about that.
Yeah.
And it's almost arguable to say, and it's kind of crazy, for some people might feel that this is crazy, to say that he has a more decorated career than even Carmelo. He brought his team to the finals.
For sure.
He has that finals appearance on it, being his own leader, being the leader of his own team. So because of that, I'm just sitting here and I'm really thinking, how do you leave him off the list? Kyrie, the reason why I'm not too terribly upset, yes, Kyrie has accolades such as like being All-Star Game MVP, Rookie of the Year, his All NBAs, his
champion
finals, champion championship, his finals appearances. Yes, he has all of those, and I think that should be a reason why he is at least considered in the honorable mentions. But there is more of a conversation to be had about Dwight Howard in my mind first.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said. Even as a Knicks fan, like I agree 100%. I'd rather have Dwight Howard on this list over Carmelo Anthony. this is just this man was so dominant. Remember when Dwight Howard went to the Lakers to play with Kobe and Steve Nash, how afraid everybody was.
Mhm.
It was like, oh my God, they're going to win the championship. It's over. Next season's over. Like, it's similar to like what happened with when Kevin Durant went to Golden State. Of like, everyone was like, this is over. But everyone thought that was going to happen. Just that's because of how dominant Dwight Howard was. Now, his career went downwards from there. But like you said, like 8 NBA all time or NBA selection team, all NBA team selections and all that, like defensive player of the year, like this man, it's the best resume that's not on this list. I think that's something to say for. I think Kyrie should be somewhere in that conversation. I think it's I I don't think it's crazy to say he has more of a reason to be on that list over a player like Damian Lillard. As much as we all like Damian Lillard, like just look at the accolades right there. And you can probably say throughout their career, they're both around the same talent wise, but one is a champion and one has all these things, and the other one is rookie of the year. And that's about it.
You know, and this is kind of the unfair part about it, is there's two things I would say. And granted, I'm not in the conspiracy theme. I am not a conspiracy maker. I just think that it is, you can have this question, you can put this question out there and have everybody wonder and, you know, answer it in their own homes and keep that between themselves. But how much does, you know, when they did the 50th anniversary at the All-Star game, they presented the jackets to them, right?
Yeah.
How much of the Kyrie situation with the vax play a part into, do we go down these can of worms? Yeah. And the NBA says like, it's easier not to go down these can of worms than if we don't put them on this list, right? So there's that. And then the second thing, much like you mentioned, is there's two people on the list that make me go, huh, in comparison to Kyrie. And I wouldn't say Carmelo. I would say Dame, and it's Russ. I remember years ago, we've had conversations about this. I remember us debating with some other friends of ours about the Kyrie and Russ dynamic and who is better. And the issue is, and this is where I see it also with Dame, is that as an individual talent, they may be asked to lead a team a little bit more. The facts are, Kyrie just has such a smaller sample size of doing that because he was never really asked to. And when he did, he just did not like his situation that he was in. And granted, he chose to leave. That does not mean that Kyrie could not do it, because and I always feel that people minimize this, is that Kyrie led the Celtics to the 1 seed, and everyone just is like, Kyrie's the worst thing for the Celtics when he left, and this and that. He lost to the Bucks, who we know at that point still have Giannis. Yep. So I don't think there was enough of a sample size to really say one way or the other about Kyrie being able to lead a team on his own. And because of that, it feels like, and someone mentioned this on Twitter, is that we went years sometimes where we question, is Dame really even an all-star? Is Dame really, would you take Dame over this person? To now he's a top 75 player because he went through so much struggle. He grind so much, what he had to do for his team. So it felt more of like they did a little bit of a sympathy play. But granted, I don't want to go down that road. And then with Russ, I appreciate the MVP. I appreciate the triple doubles, but those do not equate to what Kyrie has done in his career,
Yeah.
and the shot that he made that propelled the team to the championship.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, think about it. This list came out because of voting, and I'm sure not every voter is putting their bias away. So a lot of people don't like Kyrie, and a lot of people love Dame. Dame is like everyone's favorite player. It's your favorite player's favorite player. Like, so I see, like, it makes sense why he makes that list. And yeah, some other guys I want to bring up that are off this list that have some arguments. Someone like Tony Parker, Alonzo Mourning. You mentioned Dwight Howard, Tracy McGrady, Chris Bosh. Some people may even say like Vince Carter, maybe Paul Gasol, Manu Ginobili. These are all players that like could potentially be on this list. I didn't even talk about, like, there's even some like older players' names that like you may even question, like, oh, what did he do to deserve to be on this list? But yeah, it's overall, I think it's a pretty good list. I think it's a pretty good list, but there's some snubs on there that make you think.
And I was watching the Inside the NBA with on Tuesday, and they mentioned, I think it was Charles Barkley that mentioned this, is that he doesn't like the thought that they redid the list, so to speak. I agree. It should have been the 50 guys from last time, and then you open up 25 slots, because that's how you get to a real number that makes sense. Because there's guys that now that are probably on the list that people felt, you know what, they got snubbed on the last list, so now I'm going to bring them up into this list. And now you're minimizing the chances of guys that should really be on the list now, and there's just no way we could get them all, right? There's just no way we would be able to get them all, and there's definitely bias that plays a part into this, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's I'm losing my train of thought. You mentioned, oh yeah, Charles Barkley. It makes it tough if you, like you're saying, if you kept those 50 players, it makes it tough this way that we're doing it, because the game has changed so much, and there's the talent level is completely different than what it was before. But that still doesn't take away from what these previous players have done. So I would have actually liked to see if they done it like Charles Barkley suggested and kept those 50 guys that were there, because yeah, I'm sure they took off some guys that maybe didn't have the greatest numbers compared to today, and all that. So interesting. Don't hate the list though. Yeah,
I will say something now too, and maybe this might be come off a little biased, right? But doesn't this sound like this is starting to sound like the perfect storyline for a redemption for Kyrie? Like he's being overlooked. He's being constantly bashed. There's people. He's definitely gravitating. He's definitely polarizing as well.
yeah,
But if this guy waits, let's say he waits till February, I think the Nets are of the mindset that they're going to allow for this to come to whatever, come full circle, however it wants to be. If something or some development happens and he is back on the team, what type of player do you see? Because he's going to be carrying all of this, all of that baggage. And I think a lot of the reason why he had that 50-40-90 season is because of what he was hearing throughout the year and he carried that into how he played.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's a huge motivator for these guys. You see a lot of players that feel like they don't get the respect that they deserve. They up their game to the next level, and I'd be very interested to see if that happens with Kyrie. I'm sure people love a good story, and if that happened, it'd be pretty good. So we'll have to see. That being said, we've run pretty long. I think is there anything else you'd like to say before we close up?
Oh, what a beautiful first week, opening week of the NBA season. It's not over yet. Definitely there's going to be some more exciting things to say. One last update before we leave. Two, actually. Two that might bring us, that might make me just think, huh. Well, first is, after all of the praise we just gave the Bucks are actually trailing horrendously to the Heat by, I believe last time I checked was like 40 points.
No way.
And then the second thing is Kendrick Nunn actually has a bone bruise in his knee, and he has a timeline for around 4 to 6 weeks. So the Lakers' woes continue as we look at two contenders, finals contenders already having a couple issues, and then obviously Drew Holiday getting injured in that first initial game as well.
Wow, yeah, looking at this, the score as of the recording is 117 to 79 Heat. That's insane. Also, the Hawks blew out the Mavericks 113 to 87. That's hey, we got some more teams we got to talk about. I feel like we got to give more respect to the Heat now. I don't think we even touched on the Heat, and now the Hawks. So that'll be fun for next time. Everyone, go follow the For the Love of the Game podcast on Twitter. Jeff's putting some amazing work on there. I'm extremely impressed, and I know you guys would be too. I wanted to bring this up to the listeners. This episode was pretty long. Let us know. Do you like this? Leave a comment in our YouTube page or DM us on Twitter. Let us know. Do you like us leaving it longer, or do you want, because our idea was to usually keep these episodes an hour, but we just love talking about basketball so much that, as you see right now, we're 2 hours and 30 minutes into this. I love it. I'm happy to keep going and talk about things in depth, but if listeners, if you want to hear a little bit shorter, let us know. And be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. You can see our faces when we do this podcast. Follow us on everywhere and Spotify and all that good stuff. Like I said, check out the Twitter. And this was a fun one.
Right. Peace.
Episode 6.